there are different ways to win. And winning is not always what we think it is. Oftentimes, winning is really not quitting. Not quitting. We've been talking for the last several weeks about a cause, something to live for, something that we can commit ourselves to. We can live our lives with a focus and say, this matters. This matters enough for it to become something critical, very important to me. And we also have been talking about how kind of flesh that out. And we've been looking at Nehemiah and in the Old Testament. And in Nehemiah, we find a man who is a leader for sure, and who found a cause, God's cause, and began to pursue that. And started with a time of prayer, commitment, and fasting and praying, an extended period of time, understanding what it was that God wanted him to do. Then he went and assessed the situation and began to put together a plan. It started with kind of a ragtag team. They were building this wall. And I think if you just read on the surface of it, you're going, well, what's this huge deal about Nehemiah going back to Jerusalem and building a wall? Well, it would be kind of the equivalent today for you having a significant military in place to protect your nation, protect your country, or to protect your area. And so this was, the wall was broken down. It was a major point of security breach that Jerusalem had actually endured for centuries. So this wasn't a brand new problem. This is an old problem. But the temple had been rebuilt in Jerusalem, and Nehemiah had felt compelled, deeply burdened by God to do something about rebuilding the wall. And he went, and they did it. Today, as we go into chapter 6 and look at it as kind of the main core of the scripture we're going to look at this morning, we find that this wall is completed. It's finished. And I don't know about you, but if I think most of us, when we finish something, there's a great sense of satisfaction that sets in. We feel really good about it. It could be as simple as your garage, cleaning your garage. It can be as simple as, finishing a course or a class. There can be a lot of things that we do that we say, this is something I went after. This is something that I kind of invested myself in. And in doing so, at the end of that, we feel good about it. And so Nehemiah and the children of Israel felt good about it. They should have felt good about it. A great mission had been accomplished. A great cause had been carried out. And so what I want to do is share with you, starting first of all in your outline, if you grab it next to you, starting with talking about understanding what a mission accomplished means. What does a mission accomplished mean? Because sometimes people look at accomplishing a mission as kind of the final resting place, the place to end. It really is not necessarily that, but we're going to look at 4 angles of that, okay? The first one is this. Something significant has happened. Whenever you've accomplished a mission, when your cause has been fulfilled, something significant has happened. And for the children of Israel in this story, if you look at verse 1 of chapter 6, it says, now when it was reported to Sanballat, Tobiah, to Geshem the Arab, and to the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall and that no breach remained in it, although at that time I had not set up the doors and the gates. Now, jump on over, if you would, to verse 15, and in the same chapter, chapter 6, it says, so the wall was completed on the 25th of the month Elul in 52 days. 52 days. These boys were hard at it. And if you remember, along the way, they'd had quite a bit of opposition, so they ended up having every person be a soldier and every person be a worker and a soldier. So they were prepared for battle, and they were also working and building a wall. So they did this in record time. I mean, it was really pretty amazing. And these were not people who were professionally doing this. I mean, these walls had been broken down for centuries. So the people who lived there, that's all they knew. They only knew the walls broken down. And so for this to come together in this short amount of time, just a month and a half, or in that approximation, that was like a massive, massive change for them. And so something significant has happened. Now, we talked about a lot of different causes you might have. So your cause might be your marriage. You might say, my marriage is in trouble. Things are not going well. Things are difficult. But I'm making a cause. I'm going to do what I can do. And I'm going to ask God to do only what he can do. I'm going to really invest myself in endeavoring to meet my spouse's needs. I'm going to invest myself in trying to encourage better communication. I'm going to invest myself in doing whatever we can do to make this work. And so you're lined up counseling, and maybe, or not, or maybe you've agreed to read a book together. Maybe you started praying together. Maybe you've started just having a set time in the week where you're talking together. And right now in this moment, you're thinking, we are on the right track. I set out as my cause to improve marriage. It is improved. That's great. Celebrate it. But remember, that's not the end of the line. You say, I've been wanting to have, a prayer time with my children before they go to bed. I've gone 2 weeks now, and we've had prayer time at least 4 or 5 nights a week with our kids. And so we have accomplished our cause. We set out to do this. We've done that. Other areas we've talked about, whatever it was, something significant. That does mean this. Something significant has happened. Anytime that we're able to change a course of action and improve it through the power and strength of God, then that is something significant, without a doubt. So let's go to number 2. It's a place where the tide turns. In other words, once we kind of hit a place where now we're doing what we set out to do, now we're on track with what we set out to do, it's a place where the tide turns. Look with me, if you would, at verse 16. I love this verse. This is not my favorite verse, but it's my second favorite verse in this whole chapter. It says, when all our enemies heard of it, and all the nations surrounding us saw it, it's talking about the wall being completed, they lost their confidence. We don't have it on your notes, and some people mark in their Bible, some people don't. If you have your Bible when you have it open, that would be a good line to underline. They lost their confidence, for they recognized that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. 2 phrases out of there. These people lost their confidence. The enemies lost their confidence, and because they had realized that this was God's work. See, whenever we are doing God's cause, God will help us accomplish something that's bigger than us. It really, by all standards, these people should never have been able to rebuild this wall, especially in the face of the kind of opposition they had, in 52 days. They shouldn't have been able to do it. But they did. And the reason they did, and the reason that the people didn't stand, you notice the people aren't standing back and going, now those are some smart people. Wow, I'm impressed with those guys. Those guys have it together. Man, Nehemiah, wow, what a cool guy. They didn't say that. They gave God credit. The enemies gave God credit and said, because you know what? These people who were living there had been living there a long time with broken down walls. In fact, their entire lifetime. That's all they'd ever known. So those people knew those people weren't smart enough to do it, or they'd have already done it. Nehemiah wasn't that good. I mean, he'd been a cupbearer for the king, but he wasn't some unbelievable construction and engineer whiz. So they didn't go, man, those people in Nehemiah are brilliant. They said, this has to be God's work. And that's what caused them to be intimidated. Because what they realized, they weren't just dealing with crazy people, silly people. They were dealing with the power of Almighty God. And I'm going to just say to you today, please remember, if your cause is God's cause, if your cause is God's cause, He will do more than you could ever do by yourself. He will help you achieve more than you would ever be able to do by yourself, doing whatever that cause is. And so please always remember that whether it's your marriage you're working on, whether it's your relationship with your children, whether it's your work environment, whether it's your neighborhood, whether it's your extended family, or whether it's your friends, whatever it is that God has kind of ask you to take on and to address and work with, remember this: with God, not only are all things possible, but greater things are possible. And whenever we do something with God, it turns tides. There are times whenever there are significant change points that make a massive, massive difference. This building of the wall all of a sudden caused fear to go into the hearts of the enemies, and for them to go, hey, we're up against something bigger than those people over there. We're up against something bigger than that. Number 3, it's a cause for celebration. Look at chapter 7 and verse 1, and we do dive into chapter 7 a couple places here. It says, that when the wall was rebuilt, and I had set up the doors, and the gatekeepers, and the singers, and the Levites were appointed. I found it interesting that the very first thing he did after the wall was complete, of course, he put gatekeepers up. We would all go, well, that would be smart. Let's put people at the gates. Let's put guards at the gates. And so he did that. We'd all agree. We're going, yeah, I think all of us would have thought of that. But I don't know if everybody would have thought of the next 2 things that he did. And that was, he appointed singers. Appointed singers. And he appointed the Levites. Now, the Levites were those who were the priesthood. Those are the ones who served in that role of doing the work of ministry as far as professionally. And so the Levites were that people. He put into place people in ministry, those from the Levites, people who are already called specifically for it, put them in place, and he put the singers in place. Well, in most cases, there's only one major reason in the realm of God's kingdom to have singers, and that is to offer up praise, to worship. And so here they had, he says, we've got this work done, but we need a couple things in place here immediately. So he brought together the singers. And so whenever we accomplish something, it is very, very important. Whenever we maybe reach a goal, we hit a place where we're going, that job, we set out to do that, we're there now. And we've accomplished this. Whenever you set out to do that and you've done it, then it is cause for celebration. There's a good reason to do that. Many of us today, maybe if we did something within our family or we reach a certain goal or something like that, many of us will say, well, let's go to our favorite restaurant, and celebrate. Please don't have the people in the restaurant sing to you, because there's one requirement I found for most people who are servers in restaurants. And you know what that is? The requirement is that you cannot sing on key. No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, if you've ever had, you had that experience, you're going, could you just pause that and let our group here sing? Or, anyway, hey, you have to give it to them. Most of them have spirit. In some restaurants caught on, and they just do like a rally call of some kind. They don't do, they do like a poem or whatever it is. I did notice that Macaroni Grill, is that the name of the place? Anyway, Italian restaurant. When they first opened, they used to have an opera singer in there, So you'd have an opera singer sing happy birthday to you. That was unusual because, I'm used to hearing people sing off key. Anyway, that's number 4. Let's go on to number 4. Man, anybody ever say I was a rabbit trailer? Everybody that knows me knows. Number 4, it's a time for new beginnings. A time for new beginnings. Isn't it often that we look at a great achievement as it's finished, it's finalized? I've been working so hard to get that degree. Everybody come to my graduation because my life's over now. I'm finished. Well, I guess that somewhere along the line, colleges and universities figured out that they better remind everybody on the day of their graduation that it's not over, because they call it commencement, and it means it's just beginning. And so here you are. Yes, it is a finish, and yes, there's cause for celebration. Something significant has happened. There's a tide that turns now. People expect more out of you carrying that degree with you. You're going to put it on some wall someplace, and yes, people are going, you have a degree from Harvard? Where they're not expecting you to be a ditzo, I mean, you expect something more out of you than that. And so, but here's the deal. You walk across that stage, you receive the degree, and it is a great and a high moment and a tremendous moment that needs to be celebrated. But the reality is, it's a brand new beginning. It's a new beginning. People look forward to marriage, and they're all excited about it, and they're going to get married, and we love you so much, and this, and then they'll hear people all along, saying stuff to them, little negative things, people who are married where they work or something like that, saying, well, enjoy your last few days of freedom, and, and whatever else, and it is all these little negative things. You know what? People that are coming up close to marriage, they don't hear a word of it. They're like, they have no idea how in love I am. I mean, they have no idea how great our relationship is. And so it's like, man, this is really awesome. 18 months later, man, if I'd have only known your feet stunk like that. Whew, man, if I'd have realized that you squeeze the toothpaste at the top instead of the bottom, I mean, but here's the deal. What we know is if you're married and you've been married for a while, what you know and understand is this. Marriage is a great moment. It is a great celebration. And there's a reason why it's made a great celebration, because it's very critical. It's a very important thing. And you need that celebration to remind yourself of many times over the years, and going, remember that great celebration day we had? And we're gonna celebrate it again this year, And here's the deal. The deal is this. Marriage, once you walk out that door to the nice, cool music, and everybody's all excited, it's just the beginning. It's the beginning. It's not the end. It's the end of the courtship. It's the beginning of the marriage. What a great day. But that's not the end. What about babies being born? You find out the good news, see the home test, and it's like, wow, that's awesome. Then you go to the doctor and find out it's really true, and then you hear the heartbeat, and then you start, today's world, I mean, you get to see the kids before they're here. It's like it used to be, well, we don't know what kind of kid it is, boy or girl, and we don't know, I mean, now you can see head of hair, you can see, it's like, hey, they've got their dad's nose, and this is like 3 months before they're born. And so, but the deal is, this 9-month thing unfolds, and there's all this anticipation, and oftentimes parents have been painting, they've got a crib in there, they've got all of this stuff, and they've gone into, it's all set up, it's all ready. The baby's born. We made it. Johnny's here. But in all of that planning and everything else, and all that excitement, you forgot that Johnny was going to have lungs, and that Johnny was going to have a digestive system that worked, and that Johnny was going to be selfish, and that Johnny was going to be a lot of work. Oh, a great celebration. It is a wonderful celebration. It is. But it's only just begun. And some of you that have younger children, you're thinking, well, I'll grit this out till they're 18, I'll take them to the door gently and, kind of put them out to the curb like that. Well, you go ahead. They've got this radar somewhere in them that knows exactly, it don't matter what curb you drop them off at, they still know where home is. They're homing pigeons. So here's something. I have a 30-year-old child, okay? And she's very independent and takes care of herself well and all that. So but what I would say is this. I would say once a parent, always a parent. You don't sign off. You don't get to quit. Yes, it changes over seasons and that kind of thing. But when you're a parent, you're always a parent. When that baby was born, you just got handed a lifetime assignment. Amen. And that's wonderful. That's good. Yeah. I'm not saying that negatively. Thank you, Bill. You're exactly right. But what I am saying is this: the birth isn't the end, it's the beginning. Retirement. We're finally getting some people in our church old enough to think about retirement or something, or maybe some have retired, or that kind of thing. So for years and years, we didn't even have anybody that was 50 years old. So we, so it's like retirement's like, who ever heard of retirement? And Tom's got it right on the retirement thing too. Retirement isn't supposed to be, just prop your feet up and drink lemonade in the shade until Jesus comes back. I mean, you can do some of that, but, make your life still have purpose. Whenever a person retires, it is the finish of something it is. But in our culture today, many times it's the beginning of a second chapter of life. And if someone will take it as that, it really can make a significant difference. It's like we live in a world now where people live long enough, in most cases, people can actually kind of have two careers. And it doesn't matter if one of those careers is retirement. You still can do some things in those retirement years that can make a huge, huge difference. So it's a time for new beginnings. Don't ever look at the things that you set out to do. I mean, certainly there are some tasks that get finished and they're done and that's it. But most things, you get them to a certain point, then you keep after it. Keep it going. Keep it moving in the right direction. Something I've found about neutral is this. When you finally get to a certain place, you're going, hey, we got this, and you put it into neutral, the only way you move in neutral is downhill. You ever notice? In neutral, it doesn't go uphill. It goes downhill. So let me encourage you to remember, there isn't a place for sticking in neutral and just coasting on out the rest of it. Now let's look at some keys to accomplishing a mission. And these are things I'm just taking. I'm not going anyplace else other than right within the context of Nehemiah here. So you might think of something else, that's great, but these are within the context of what Nehemiah dealt with as he was accomplishing this building of the wall. And let me also, before I go there, let me just have you look at chapter 7, verse 4, as to what Nehemiah was looking at, what the new beginnings for him. Now the city was large and spacious, but the people in it were few, and the houses were not built. So the wall being built was just the beginning. Very significant work, and that was accomplished. But it was just the beginning. Next week, we're going to talk about what the rest of that kind of looks like as we wrap up our series in Nehemiah. And so, encourage you to be here, be a part of that, kind of consolidating our win. Let's look at these keys to accomplishing a mission. Number one, know who you are. Know who you are. And this is true in so many areas of life. In fact, I would even say all areas of life. We function so much better if we know who we are. Look at verse 11. And we're kind of moving around here. This isn't going through verse by verse because there's a variety of situations here that take place. And verse 11, Nehemiah had been encouraged to go into the temple and close the doors because he's all of a sudden getting all this strong opposition because the work is right at the threshold of being done and the gates being hung. And right at that point, they're doing everything. They're doing like this, all these last-ditch efforts to stop him. And so how he accomplished this mission was one of the ways was being very clear-headed about who he was. Look at verse 11. It says this, "But I said, should a man like me flee? And could one such as I go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in." He would have been actually disobedient to God to have gone in the temple and shut the door as they were asking him to do. And even though it sounded like a good thing because it's like saving you, they were going to kill you. Come on in here. That was why he was being told, come on in here because they're trying to kill you. And Nehemiah, he said, there were two phrases in this passage. He says, should a man like me and one such as I. Those are two phrases he used in this verse. And you're going, what does he mean by that? Well, I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty certain some of it. One is, he's the governor. Should I, the governor, run and hide? Should I, who lives my life to honor God, go into the temple and disobey God, go into this space. I'm not a priest. I'm not a part of the priesthood. I'm a governor. I cannot go against what I know is right. He had integrity. He was a person of integrity. I'm a person of integrity. I'm not going to violate that integrity. He also knew who he was. He knew the king personally. He was one of the king's best friends. He was the cupbearer of the king. The king had sent him on a mission. He didn't have any reason to fear these other people. These other people who were enemies of him, Sanballat, Tobiah, these others, they were governors of areas right around Israel. And so they had been able to pillage Jerusalem over these years with the walls being down, and they were deeply frustrated by this wall that had been built, and now their plans had been kind of set on the back burner. And so they're trying to, in every way they can, to derail this guy. And Nehemiah's going, guys, it's not that easy, because I actually know who I am. And I'm not that, and I'm not that. And I am this. I'm the governor. I'm the king's cupbearer. I'm one of his best friends. I'm a follower of God. I know who I am, and I know who I'm not. And I want to tell you this. That is one of the most significant places that you can come to when you have a clear idea of who you are and who you aren't. Who you are and who you aren't. When you're clear about your own identity in Christ, what begins to happen is, and as a follower of God, what begins to happen is you become much clearer minded about how to live your life, about the things that you will allow to distract you and take you away from the mission of your life, or the things that you will embrace that keep you on task and mission for your life. And I can promise you, one of the most effective tools that Satan has in our world today is people are confused about who they are. Many times, even as Americans today, we're confused about who we are as Americans. It's like a whole culture to bring confusion about who you are. I would just say, before you and within your life, before God, get clear about who you are. I'm a person who's born again. I've been spiritually born into the family of God. I'm a person who's a child of the King. Jesus said so. He said that I would actually be able to reign with him for all of eternity. I'm a child of the King. There are many, many implications of all that. And I know that is like a whole sermon in of itself. But what I want to tell you is, your name, if you're a believer, is written down in the Lamb's Book of Life. God's plans for you are eternal. They start today. They're here right now, but they're eternal. He wants to use your life for better things and greater things than we ever imagined. Know who you are. That enabled Nehemiah to stay on mission, being aware of who he was. Number 2, have discernment. Verse 12, he says this. He says, "Then I perceived that surely God had not sent him, but he uttered his prophecy against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him." These other governors had hired this man to prophesy and tell Nehemiah to come into the temple. He had a vision to tell him to come into the temple so he'd be protected. And Nehemiah, he said, I perceived. You know what discernment is? Discernment is understanding and seeing something beyond just what's on the surface. It's being able to see kind of below the surface a little bit. It's being able to see, and if you don't develop some level, some people have the spiritual gift of discernment, but if you don't develop some ability to discern right from wrong, good influences from bad influences, and those kinds of things, you end up kind of being a sucker to anything. You have to have discernment. Nehemiah, the reason he perceived something was wrong is because the man asked him to do something that was wrong. He's going, this God would not ask me to do something that's wrong. So he's going, I have an antenna went up, and he's going, something's not right with this. This man is not truly a man of God. He's not truly trying to do the right thing. Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked me to do something wrong. Number 3, know the truth. See, the truth is really what ultimately caused Nehemiah to be able to have the discernment that he did. Verse 13, it says this: he was hired, speaking of this man, he was hired for this reason, that I might become frightened and act accordingly and sin, so that they might have an evil report in order that they could reproach me. Nehemiah is saying, you know what? I know God's not going to ask me to do something that's wrong. Because he knew the truth, he was able to resist a situation that was going to put him really in a bad way. It was going to break down his integrity. It was going to cause him to really be in a reproach instead of an inspiration. Instead of a leader of character and integrity, he was going to be someone who had compromised just for his own safety. Nehemiah says, no. God would not ask me to do something that violates his truth. And I need to declare to you today, there are many, many voices in our world who would declare that what God has declared as truth, they will declare it as false. And they will encourage you to do things that are in direct violation to what God says. You know, and I'm sorry, you can go ahead and do it, but you'll do it to your own detriment. And so when you know the truth, as the Bible, as Jesus said, sets you free. It gives you the freedom to know right from wrong, to know how to live your life in a more effective way. And so knowing the truth is critical. In this case, it probably saved Nehemiah's life and saved the mission that he was on. He said, this doesn't add up. Doesn't add up because it violates the truth. And if we learn to live our lives according to the truth, it will spare us so much trouble. Doesn't mean you won't have trouble. I mean, Nehemiah, I think if you were to ask him this day in this place, you go, Nehemiah, do you feel like you have a headache or two going on? He'd go, I've got 10 headaches going on. You read this whole chapter, you read the chapters previous to it, you talk about opposition. But what Nehemiah kept doing was staying on course. Slowed down a little bit, but on course. He never stopped moving the ship in the right direction. Number 4, you need to figure out who your friends are. I'm pausing here for a reason, not because I'm lacking thoughts. I want to be wise in what I say. But I want you to look at verse 17 and look down through verse 19. It says this: also in those days, many letters went from the nobles of Judah. If you remember, there were some nobles who would not help build the wall. Pretty certain these are the same guys. So there were nobles of Judah who were sent. These letters were sent from nobles of Judah to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Era, and his son Jehohanan had married the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah. Can I pause right there a minute? I really believe speaking in tongues started with people reading names in the Old Testament. I'm like, I was reviewing these names and I'm going, am I going to read these or not? I don't know. Because I can pronounce it well by myself and then all of a sudden get in public and all of a sudden start stammering on it. Like I'm going, and it struck me, I'm going, I know where speaking in tongues came from, right here. People were reading the Old Testament really fast. Anyway, if you speak in tongues, I'm not against you, brother, sister, okay? Moreover, they were speaking about his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him. Then Tobiah sent letters to frighten me. Just because somebody is in a broad association with you does not necessarily mean they are with you. See, these nobles, they were part of Jerusalem. You would have thought they'd have been tickled pink to be having the walls go up. But see, they had an alliance with a governor. with another governor outside of their region, and as a result, they were benefiting. We already talked about that some. They had personal benefit. They had connections and personal benefit. This is called the Jerusalem Mafia. No, I don't know, but anyway, they were connected in a sense with all the wrong people, and as a result, what Nehemiah was doing was going to hinder the kinds of associations and the kinds of benefits that they had by him completing this wall and stopping this. So these people were two-faced. They would talk to Nehemiah and say real positive things about his enemy. And then when Nehemiah spoke anything they heard him say, they would take and turn around and they would send it off to these governors and tell them what Nehemiah was saying. So it really was they should have been friends, but they weren't. And I want to say this too, and that is that sometimes people, there are a lot of well-meaning people, but I just think you have to be careful where you get your advice from. You have to be careful who you listen to. And when I say that, I don't mean you need to be paranoid about it, because God will give you discernment and that kind of thing, but you just need to really have confidence in that people have your best interest at heart. When you ask someone advice about something, you have to believe they have your best interest at heart. I had a situation when I was young in ministry where I had a ministry opportunity that opened to me, and I'd been contacted and actually visited and talked to those people about maybe doing that ministry. And I had two people that I trust. I still to this day trust them a lot. But in that situation, I should not have trusted their judgment, because both of them had something to win or lose by that situation. One of them was the second choice on the list of people they were going to talk to. And so I consulted with those two people. And both of them gave me an answer that I went with. And today I'm not regretting that. But in hindsight, early on, I had to work through a little process with my attitude, because I realized even though they cared about me in general, they had vested interests themselves based on what decision I would make there that would either benefit or not benefit them. And so whenever, you have to be wise about who you get your advice from. And that was just a good learning lesson for me. I don't live with regrets about any of that. I'm just simply saying it was a maturing experience for me, and also an opportunity for me to kind of let go of some negative feelings at first with regard when I realized kind of what had happened there. And so it's very, very important for you to make sure that if you confide in someone, that they're trustworthy and they have your best interest. Nehemiah, I think, already kind of understood where these people were. But I'm just going to tell you, just because they were inside those walls did not mean they were his friends. And if he had counted on them as his friends, he would not have accomplished the mission God sent him out to accomplish. Number 5, expect resistance. If you're doing something good, you're doing something positive, and you're making a difference, you will receive resistance. I think we have this, we grew up on stories like Cinderella and Snow White, and we have this mindset sometimes that we really, in this life, are going to live happily ever after. And until we live happily ever after, we're going to end up living unhappily ever after until that happens. And the unfortunate thing is this, that we will end up living unhappily ever after for a whole lifetime, because it's not going to be happily ever after. Are there happy moments? Are there great moments? Are there celebrations? Can life be good? Absolutely. But if we think that we can go through life and do good things and right things without resistance and without things going against us, we're wrong. Look at verse 2. Chapter 6, verse 2. It says this: Then Sanballat and Geshem sent a messenger to me, saying, Come, let us meet together at Sheraphim in the plain of Ono. But they were planning to harm me. They weren't just going to talk bad about him. They were actually planning on killing him. So it's a pretty clearly understood idea. If they could get him far enough away from Jerusalem by himself, they were going to kill him. And then look at verses 5 through 7. It says this: Then Sanballat sent his servant to me in the same manner a fifth time with an open letter in his hand. And so here we go into the intimidation factor. And it was written, it is reported among the nations, and Gashmu says, that was one of those tongues words, that you and the Jews are planning to rebel. Therefore, you are rebuilding the wall, and you are to be their king according to these reports. You have also appointed prophets to proclaim in Jerusalem concerning you, a king is in Judah, and now it will be reported to the king according to these reports. So come now, let us take counsel together. Wow. These guys are going to report back to the king. What they didn't take into consideration when they were writing these letters to Nehemiah was all these things that he already knew about himself. He had a long history with the king. The king had sent him protection, sent him provision, given him permission, all those things. He was the king's best friend, or at least one of his very best friends. He ate and drank every day with the king for all this time period, had this amazing relationship. The king maybe hardly even knew these guys, except knew their names as governors of these areas, because this was a massive Persian kingdom. So Nehemiah is not blown away by this, and he isn't shaking in his boots with this resistance. And we could go on and talk about in verse 10, it says, this is where this guy had tried to get him to go to the temple. It says, when I entered the house of Shemaiah, the son of Delaiah, son of Meatabel, whichever it was there, who was, I had it down once, but who was confined at home, he said, let us meet together in the house of God within the temple, and let us close the doors of the temple, for they are coming to kill you, for they are coming to kill you at night. Boy, doesn't that sound like they're coming to kill you, and they're coming to kill you at night. Come, let's get inside the temple and lock the doors. Now, Nehemiah is trying to put the finishing touches on this wall, and all this stuff is coming at him. He obviously had expected some resistance because it didn't shake him real bad. I'm not saying he wasn't concerned. I'm not saying he wasn't. I mean, he took serious the threats. He armed the people, if you remember. But just because there was resistance, it didn't mean he wasn't doing the right thing. Have you ever heard anybody say, well, this all worked out just like that? It all seemed to work out, so it must have been God's will. If you were standing there and having that conversation with Nehemiah, he'd probably go, well, wasn't all working out all that well for me. I wasn't getting all these open doors. I was getting closed doors everywhere. I just had to keep doing what I knew God wanted me to do. Sometimes if we're going to do what God wants us to do in our marriage and our family, we do it in spite of the fact that there is a lot of resistance to it. If we're going to build a great church right here in this community, we're going to do it in spite of the fact that everything doesn't go the way we want it to. More people move out of town than what we planned on. Everything else, we're going to do what God's called us to do in spite of it. Resistance does not mean God's against you. It means you have an enemy against you. But if you have God with you, the enemy ultimately is doomed, even if he slows you down and causes some difficulty and gives a little heartburn. Number 6, have a follow-through mentality. Look at verse 1 of chapter 7 one more time with me. It says, now when the wall was rebuilt and I had set up the doors. You know, too often, and I've done it for myself, I've seen it happen in too many people's lives, we just settle for good enough. Good enough. It's good enough. He had a follow-through mentality. You know, you're painting your bedroom, and you're getting tired. You're getting down, and you were going to move the dresser out and paint behind it, and you were going to move the bed out and paint behind it, but it looked pretty good, and you're thinking you're going to leave that stuff there for the next 3 years anyway. It's just good enough. We'll be the only ones that know it's not painted behind there. Then a year later, you find out you have to get relocated and move. oh, those behind that dresser, do you remember? Oh my goodness, start moving stuff. I wish we would have finished it then. I don't even know where that pain is. Have a follow-through mentality if you want to accomplish a mission. Number 7, resist discouragement. Verse 3, this is my favorite verse in this chapter. It's your memory verse. It says this. So I sent, this is after he had this message for come down and talk to him. He says, so I sent messengers to them saying, I am doing a great work and I cannot come down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and come down to you? He said, I'm here to build this wall. I'm not here to have conversations with you guys out in the valley of Ono, plain of Ono. I'm not here to consult with you guys. I'm not here to counsel with you. I'm not here to talk. I am here to do what God's called me to do. Look at verse 8. Then I sent a message to him. This is after they sent this letter saying he was going to try to rebel and become the king. He says, then I sent a message to him saying, such things as you are saying have not been done, but you are inventing them in your own mind. I love that. Man, Nehemiah, I like how he talks. He kind of says stuff. I wish he was a politician today. Anyway, in our world, just say some things out there that need to be said. You are just making stuff up. You are inventing things in your head. I like it. Look at verse 13. He was hired for this reason, speaking of that prophet that had prophesied over him about going to the temple, that I may become frightened and act accordingly in sin, so that they might have an evil report in order that they could reproach me. Now, just want to tell you, discouragement happens, and I've had my fair share of discouragement in life. And honestly, I don't know. You can't control the fact that discouragement comes, but I do have control of whether I embrace it or resist it. And I can tell you this, when I embrace discouragement, I am not a better person for it. Nobody's going to walk away from me and go, well, Rod is so inspiring. He just lifts me up. But if I am resisting discouragement, I find myself being the person I believe God's asked me to be. That is faith-filled and confident, even if there are circumstances that are a little shaky around me, because I know who I belong to and I know whose plan I'm on, and that it always works. Number 8, stay engaged with God. Stay engaged with God. Verse 9, again, a great verse, especially the end of it says, for all of them were trying to frighten us, thinking they will become discouraged with the work, and it will not be done. But now, oh God, strengthen my hands. He says, they're just trying to distract me, trying to get me all off here, discourage me. But he goes, oh God, please just strengthen my hands. He heard what all they said. He heard all the stuff around him. But then his answer is this, oh God, please strengthen my hands. In other words, God, I'm going to do the work. If you give me the strength, I'm going to do the work. I'm going to finish it. Verse 14. Remember, oh my God, Tobiah and Sanballat, according to these works of theirs, and also Noadiah, the prophetess, and the rest of the prophets who were trying to frighten me. And again, he says, he didn't try to take vengeance in his own hands. He didn't go, man, as soon as we get this wall built, we're going to go out and kill them. I mean, we're going to go out and now all of a sudden, we're going to start writing letters to everybody. He didn't do it. He didn't have to get into the whole back and forth thing. He's just saying, God, you know what? These people that have been trying to stop, I'm just going to put them in your hands. You do what you know to do with regard to them. He stayed engaged with God. This wasn't about Nehemiah, and it was about God's plan. It was about God's plan, his purpose. And when our life is about God's plan and his purpose, then we don't have to think, we don't have to live vindictively. We also do not have to live in a state of panic. We can live courageously and confidently, and as we surrender all the challenges to God and say, God, if you'll strengthen my hands and strengthen my heart, I'll tackle today. See, God doesn't ask us to, he doesn't sit here and go, well, do you have 10 good years left in you? He doesn't do that. Do you have the next hour? Do you have the next day? See, he doesn't give us more than we can bear because he in the sense that he doesn't weigh us down with things that we can't do anything about today. God lives with us in the present, in this present moment. Let's walk with him in the present. And let's do great things, not because we're so great, not because we set out to become a hero, but because we believe that the things that we're engaged in, such as our marriage, our families, our church, our work, our community, the things that we're engaged in, that we will move forward the cause of God through allowing God to live and work in us in such a way that his kingdom comes and his will is done on earth as it is in heaven.